The galaxy was wide and filled with stars, but most of those stars already belonged to someone. Humanity had just begun to step out of their home system, building colonies, small fleets, and trade routes. They were the newcomers, and many of the older alien empires did not welcome them kindly. The Veyari Empire was one of those powers. Their ships were larger, their weapons stronger, and their armies more disciplined. To them, humans were a small voice trying to sing in a choir already filled with powerful voices. And yet, humanity did not stay quiet. They pushed forward, bold and stubborn, even when logic said they should stop. It was during one of these small clashes on the border that Elias Ward was captured. He was a young officer of Earth's fleet, no more than 30 years of age, with eyes that carried both caution and defiance. His small patrol ship had been surrounded, his crew scattered or killed, and he was taken prisoner by the Veyari. Instead of being sent to a prison, however, fate had other plans. The Empire decided to present him before the royal court as a symbol of their victory and proof that humans could be crushed whenever the Empire chose. The hall of the Veyari court was unlike anything Elias had ever seen. Towering pillars shimmered with veins of glowing crystal, and banners of silver and blue stretched from the high ceilings. Alien nobles, tall and elegant, stood in rows, their eyes filled with pride and disdain as they watched the lone human, dragged inside. Elias was chained at the wrists, but he walked upright, his step steady. The guards expected him to bow his head, to look small, but instead he raised his chin, scanning the hall with calm curiosity. It unsettled them, though they said nothing. At the end of the hall sat Princess Sirenia Veyar, the jewel of the Empire. She was young in the eyes of her people, perhaps the equivalent of Elias's own age, but she carried herself with the weight of generations. Her hair shimmered like woven starlight, her skin faintly luminous as if light lived beneath it, and her eyes glowed with sharp intelligence. To her subjects, she was flawless. To her enemies, she was untouchable. No one ever spoke to her without careful choice of words. No one ever dared meet her eyes for too long. That was the rule. That was the custom. Elias, however, was not raised in her empire. He was raised human. When he finally looked upon her, he did not look away. His gaze was steady, not aggressive but not submissive either. It was the look of someone who saw another being, not an untouchable symbol. Sirenia noticed it immediately. She had seen countless envoys, prisoners, and generals bend before her presence, their words heavy with fear or flattery. But this human did not bend. He stood as if he had every right to be there, even though he was a prisoner in chains. Something in her chest tightened at the sight, though she kept her face calm. The chamber grew quiet as the princess rose from her seat. Her voice was soft yet commanding, each word echoing across the crystal walls. She asked the human his name. Elias Ward, he answered simply. His voice carried clearly, not shaking. He did not add any title or bow his head, which drew murmurs of shock from the gathered nobles. A few of them hissed insults under their breath, but Elias did not react. His attention remained on the princess. Sirenia studied him carefully. She asked why humans resisted, why they fought hopeless battles against forces that should have crushed them easily. She expected excuses, perhaps anger or silence. Instead, Elias gave a small, almost tired smile. Because we believe we are, more than the limits placed on us, he said. We fight because someone has to. If we don't stand, then no one will. It doesn't matter if the enemy is stronger. What matters is that we refuse to give up. The nobles laughed at his words, mocking his simplicity. They whispered that humans were foolish, that their stubbornness was nothing but weakness pretending to be courage. But Sirenia did not laugh. She tilted her head, considering his answer. It was not polished like the speeches she was used to. It was not a calculated phrase meant to win favor. It was just truth. Raw and plain. She stepped closer, her eyes fixed on his. And do you think you have achieved anything by being captured here, human? Do you think your defiance has meaning now? Elias did not hesitate. I think standing here and looking at you without fear has meaning enough." The hall grew silent. The guards tightened their grip on their weapons. The nobles were outraged. To speak so boldly to the princess was unthinkable. And yet Elias did not say it with arrogance. His tone was calm, even respectful in its own way, but filled with honesty. He was not trying to insult her. He was speaking his truth. Something inside Serenia shifted. All her life she had been told she was perfect, glorious, destined to rule. Every word spoken to her was wrapped in fear or forced reverence. No one dared to see her as anything other than her title. But this human, this fragile, captured being, looked at her and spoke as if she was simply a person. And then, when she pressed him further, he did something no one else had ever done. He praised her. "I know why your people follow you," Elias said, his voice quiet, but strong enough to carry. "You stand at the front. You don't just hide, behind walls or titles. You come here, face your enemies yourself. That takes courage. More courage than I've seen in many leaders of my own kind. That deserves respect." The words were simple, but to Serenia they were like fire breaking through ice. For years she had received endless praise, but it was always hollow, born of fear or duty. No one meant it. No one believed it. But this human, he meant it. She could hear it in his voice, see it in his steady eyes. It was not meant to flatter. It was a soldier honoring another soldier. It was real. Before she could stop herself, her throat tightened, her vision blurred. She blinked rapidly, fighting against the tears that threatened to fall. The court gasped as they saw her struggle. The untouchable princess, crying in front of them all, because of a human's words. She turned slightly, trying to compose herself. But it was too late. A single tear slipped down her cheek, catching the faint glow of the chamber lights. The silence in the hall was heavy. The nobles did not know whether to be outraged, horrified, or stunned. The guards looked uncertain, glancing between their princess and the human. Elias did not mock her, did not smile with victory. He simply bowed his head slightly, showing respect. That small gesture carried more weight than any speech. Serenia raised a hand and dismissed the court, her voice trembling but still strong enough to command obedience. The nobles obeyed, though their whispers filled the air as they left. The guards remained, waiting for orders, but she waved them away as well until only she and Elias were left in the great hall. She turned back to him, wiping her cheek quickly, though she could not erase the trace of her tears. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why would you speak such words to me, a prisoner to his captor?" Elias shrugged lightly as if the answer was obvious. "Because truth matters, no matter the chains. You deserve to hear it, whether I stand free or in bonds." Serenia stared at him for a long moment. She had no answer. Her entire world had been shaken by a few honest words from someone her people considered weak and unworthy. And yet, for the first time in her life, she felt seen. Not as a princess, not as a symbol, but as herself. That night she could not sleep. The echo of the human's words stayed with her, and for the first time in all her years, the alien princess wondered if everything she had been taught about her own strength, and about humanity, was only the beginning of a larger truth. The next day, the court still whispered about what had happened. No one had ever seen Princess Serenia show such emotion, and certainly not in front of a prisoner. Some nobles thought it was a weakness. Others thought it was a dangerous sign, that the human had somehow bewitched her with his words. Rumors spread quickly, and each one made Serenia feel the weight of 1,000 unseen eyes. Yet in the quiet of her own chambers, she thought not of the court but of the human named Elias Ward. His voice still echoed in her mind, steady and honest, unlike any she had heard before. She had been raised to believe that strength meant perfection, that to falter was to bring shame to her empire. From childhood she was told that her life was not her own but the empire's. She had learned to smile when told, to speak when expected, and to remain silent when others needed her to be a symbol instead of a person. Her heart was wrapped in chains she could not see, and though she had grown used to them, the words of Elias had cracked those chains in a way she had never thought possible. She should have dismissed him as a mere human, beneath her notice. That was what her council would have wanted. Yet she found herself wanting to speak to him again. She wanted to ask him why his praise had touched her so deeply when the endless songs and speeches of her people never had. She wanted to understand what made humans so stubborn, so unwilling to bend even when crushed by a stronger foe, and perhaps though she did not want to admit it even to herself, she wanted to hear his voice again, calm and without fear. When evening fell, Serenia ordered the guards to bring Elias to a smaller chamber, away from the eyes of the court. The guards obeyed reluctantly, muttering their disapproval. To them, he was nothing more than a dangerous prisoner, not worthy of her time. But Serenia silenced them with a single glance, and they brought him as commanded. When Elias entered, his wrists were still bound, but his head was held high, his eyes steady as always. He looked at her not as a ruler, not as a goddess, but as a person, and she felt her chest tighten once more. "You summoned me," Elias said simply. His voice carried no fear, only curiosity. He did not kneel, though the guards forced him to lower his head slightly before her. Serenia dismissed them, and they left reluctantly, leaving the two of them alone. The silence was heavy for a moment, filled only by the faint hum of the crystal lights around them. "I did," Serenia replied, her voice softer than it had been in the grand hall. "I wished to speak with you, without the eyes of the court." Elias tilted his head. And what would a princess want to speak with a prisoner about? She hesitated. She had rehearsed many questions in her mind, but now, faced with him, they felt small and hollow. At last, she asked the one that burned most, strongly in her heart. "Why did your words make me cry?" Elias blinked in surprise. He had not expected such a question. He thought for a moment before answering. "Because they were true. You've been surrounded by people who tell you what they think you want to hear. Fear makes them lie. Duty makes them flatter. But when someone finally speaks to you with no fear, no reason to lie, you feel the weight of it. That's why it mattered." Serenia looked away, her fingers tightening around the armrest of her chair. His words struck her again, simple yet sharp. She had known he was right, but hearing it spoken aloud made her heart ache. She had been praised 1,000 times before, yet none of it had ever reached her. Elias's praise, however, had broken through the walls around her heart in a single moment. "You speak as if you know me," she said quietly. "I don't," Elias admitted, "but I know people, and I know what it feels like to be seen as something more than yourself. Soldiers are often treated that way, symbols instead of people. Maybe you've lived your whole life that way." Her breath caught. He had spoken, the truth she had never dared to admit. To her people, she was not Serenia the person, but Serenia the princess, the shining star of the Veyari Empire. No one asked what she wanted. No one cared what she felt. They only cared that she shone as brightly as they expected her to. And here stood a human, a prisoner, who understood that truth without needing to be told. For a long time they sat in silence. Serenia studied him, trying to understand how such a being could speak so plainly, yet strike so deeply. Elias did not fidget or avert his eyes. He sat calmly, even in chains, as if his dignity could not be taken from him. She wondered if all humans were like this, or if he was different even among his own people. Finally, she asked, "Why do humans fight as you do? You are outnumbered, outmatched, and still you resist. You must know that your chances are small." Elias gave a small, almost amused smile. "Because chances don't matter as much as choice. If someone tells us we cannot stand, that's exactly when we choose to stand. Maybe we fall. Maybe we don't win. But at least we decide our own path. That's something no one can take away from us." His words stirred something inside her. Choice. The word felt heavy on her tongue. She had never truly had choices. Her life had been decided from the moment of her birth. But humans, even when weak, clung to their choices with all their strength. That, perhaps, was why they could not be broken so easily. Serenia leaned back in her chair, her eyes distant. "Your people are reckless. Maybe. Elias admitted with a shrug. But sometimes recklessness is just another word for hope. The conversation lingered in her mind long after Elias was taken back to his cell. That night she dreamed of freedom, of standing not as a princess bound by duty, but as a person free to choose her own path. It was a dream she had never allowed herself before, and when she woke, she found herself wishing to see Elias again. Days passed, and each night Serenia summoned him to the same chamber. They spoke of many things, of humanity's struggles on their new colonies, of the Veyari Empire's traditions, of the stars themselves. Elias spoke with honesty, never bending his words to please her, and Serenia found herself drawn to that honesty more than she had ever been drawn to the polished speeches of her nobles. Sometimes he made her laugh, sometimes he made her fall into deep thought, and sometimes he made her silent with emotions she did not yet understand. The guards whispered among themselves, uneasy with how often the princess met with the human. The nobles grew suspicious, their whispers sharper each day. They wondered if she was being manipulated, if her heart was being weakened by a clever prisoner. Serenia ignored them, though she knew their patience would not last forever. For now she did not care. For the first time in her life, she felt as though she was not alone. One evening, as they spoke quietly, Elias told her a story from Earth. It was about a farmer who faced a flood that destroyed everything he owned. The farmer lost his crops, his home, even his animals, but instead of giving up, he rebuilt piece by piece until he stood again. That's how humans are, Elias explained. We break, we fall, but we always rebuild. No matter how many times we're knocked down, we rise again. Serenia listened, her heart heavy with a strange ache. She thought of herself, trapped beneath the expectations of her empire, unable to rebuild because she had never been allowed to break. She wondered what it would feel like to live as freely as that farmer, to fall and rise again, not because duty demanded it, but because her own heart chose it. Before Elias was taken away that night, she asked him one last question. Do you believe that I could choose my own path, even if I am a princess? Elias looked at her with the same steady eyes that had never once wavered. I believe anyone can, even you. Those words stayed with her long into the night. For the first time, Serenia began to wonder if the chains she had always carried were as unbreakable as she believed. And for the first time, she allowed herself to dream not of duty, but of freedom. The palace was never truly silent. Even in the deep hours of the night, the walls hummed with the energy of the crystals that powered them, and the faint sound of armored footsteps echoed in the halls. Yet for Serenia, the silence after Elias was returned to his cell always felt louder than any sound. She would sit alone, staring at the stars beyond the balcony of her chambers, and feel a hollow space inside her. The words he had spoken filled her thoughts, circling in her mind until she could no longer tell whether they were his or her own. The empire around her still functioned as it always had. The nobles quarreled over influence. The admirals prepared new strategies against the humans. Her council advised her to be careful with her image, reminding her of the pressure of her title. To them she was not Serenia, the woman, but Serenia, the princess who must shine brighter than all others. Yet for the first time she found herself questioning their voices. For the first time their words sounded dull compared to the quiet strength of a single human prisoner. In the days that followed, Serenia continued to summon Elias to her private chamber. At first it was curiosity that drove her, but soon it became something deeper. She wanted to understand him, to understand why his presence made her feel lighter, even when the world around her grew heavy. Their talks stretched longer, covering subjects she had never dared to discuss with anyone else. Elias did not flatter her. He did not bow or hide behind polite phrases. He spoke honestly, sometimes boldly, and though his words could sting, they also felt alive. One evening, as they sat across from each other, Serenia asked him about his family. For a long moment Elias was silent, his gaze lowering to the floor. She wondered if she had touched a wound too deep to uncover, but then he answered. My father was a miner, Elias said quietly. He spent his life digging through rock, on Mars. He taught me that the worth of a person isn't measured by the titles they hold but by what they give to others. He used to say that every stone he lifted, every tunnel he carved was a gift for those who came after. That's how humans see it. We live short lives, but we try to leave something behind. Serenya listened carefully, her chest tightening. She thought of her own father, the Emperor, a man so distant and untouchable that she had rarely spoken to him outside of ceremonies. He had never told her anything as simple or as warm as what Elias's father had said to him. Her own life had been built on expectations, not gifts. She wondered what it would have been like to grow up with such a lesson, to know that even the smallest action could carry meaning. "And your mother?" Serenya asked softly. "She was a teacher," Elias replied, a faint smile touching his lips. "She believed in the power of words. She said words can build bridges or burn them. Maybe that's why I speak too much sometimes." He gave a quiet laugh, and Serenya found herself smiling as well. She rarely laughed in the presence of her court, where every word was measured and weighed. Yet with Elias, laughter came easily, as if it had always been waiting inside her, locked away until he arrived. "You are different from what I expected," Serenya admitted. "My people call yours reckless, stubborn, even foolish, and yet, when I speak with you, I do not see foolishness, I see strength." "Maybe it's both," Elias said with a shrug. "Sometimes strength and foolishness look the same, but sometimes the difference is whether you stand back up when you fall." His words lingered in her mind long after the guards returned to take him away. That night, Serenya dreamed of walking through a world without chains, a world where she could choose her own steps, where she could laugh without fear of being judged. When she awoke, she realized that dream had been planted by Elias's words, like a seed growing inside her. The more time she spent with Elias, the more the court began to notice. Nobles whispered behind her back. Some suggested the human was manipulating her. Others feared that her heart was softening in a way unfit for a ruler. The council grew uneasy, pressing her to end her private meetings. But Serenya ignored them. She had listened to their voices her entire life, and for the first time, she wanted to follow her own. One evening, as the sun set beyond the crystal spires of the city, Serenya walked alone to the gardens that surrounded the palace. There, among glowing flowers and silver-leaved trees, she found Elias waiting under the watch of guards. She had ordered his presence herself, claiming she wished to show him the beauty of her homeworld before his eventual trial. The guards grumbled but obeyed, and Serenya dismissed them once more so she could be alone with him. They walked together, beneath the alien sky where twin moons rose like pale lanterns. The garden was alive with soft lights, the plants pulsing gently as if breathing. Serenya watched Elias as he took it all in, his eyes filled with wonder instead of fear. She realized then that he saw her world with the same honesty he saw her, with no lies, no masks, and it made her feel alive in a way she had never felt before. "Do you think my people will ever see humans as equals?" Serenya asked quietly as they walked. Elias thought for a long moment before answering. "I don't know. Equality isn't something given. It's something earned, sometimes the hard way. But I think it will happen, one day. Because no matter how many times you push us down, we keep standing. Eventually someone has to notice." Serenya stopped walking, her heart aching with a strange mixture of pride and sorrow. She admired his certainty, his quiet defiance. He was right. Her people did not see humans as equals now. Yet she, a princess of the empire, could not deny what she saw in him. A strength no noble title could create, a dignity that chains could not erase. In him she saw something she wished she had for herself. As they stood in the moonlight, Serenya felt a tremor of fear, not of Elias, but of her own heart. She was beginning to care for him in ways she could not explain, ways that would be dangerous if her council discovered them. Yet she could not bring herself to stop. Each meeting pulled her deeper into a bond she had never known, a bond born not of duty or tradition, but of truth. The next day, trouble came. The High Council convened, in secret, furious about the princess's growing closeness to the human. They whispered of scandal, of weakness, of danger. Some demanded Elias's execution before he could poison her further with his words. Others wanted him paraded before the people as a warning. Serenia stood before them, her expression calm, but inside she burned with anger. She wanted to shout at them, to tell them they were blind, but she held her tongue, knowing too much truth at once would only seal Elias's fate. That night she met with Elias again. He noticed her troubled expression immediately. "They're pressuring you, aren't they?" he asked. She gave a bitter laugh. "They always pressure me, but now it is because of you." Elias did not look surprised. "Then maybe you should stop meeting me. I don't want to cause you more trouble." Serenia's chest tightened at his words. The thought of losing these moments with him filled her with pain sharper than she expected. "No," she said firmly. "You are the only one who speaks to me as if I am a person. If I lose that, I lose myself." For a long moment, Elias was silent. Then he nodded, his eyes steady as always. "Then we keep talking, no matter what. It costs." Serenia felt her heart beat faster at his words. She knew the risks. She knew the danger. Yet she also knew she could not turn away from him now. For the first time in her life, she was not living for her empire, her council, or her father. She was living for herself, and for the truth that Elias had shown her. In the weeks that followed, their bond deepened. Serenia found herself smiling more, laughing more, even dreaming more. Elias told her stories of Earth, of oceans that stretched forever, of forests filled with endless green, of cities lit with lights that humans had built with their own hands. Serenia told him of her own world, of traditions and songs that stretched back thousands of years. Slowly, piece by piece, they built a bridge between their worlds, one conversation at a time, but the whispers in the court grew louder. The council's patience grew thin. Serenia could feel the storm coming, a storm that would test not only her bond with Elias, but her very strength as a princess. And though fear pressed against her, a new fire burned within her as well. For the first time she was ready to defy the chains of her destiny. For the first time she was ready to choose. The court of the Veyari Empire was no longer at peace. What had begun as whispers about the princess and her human prisoner had grown into open debate. Nobles argued in the council chamber, voices raised in anger. Some demanded Elias Ward be executed immediately to erase the shame of his influence. Others feared killing him might create a scandal, for too many had already seen how Serenia looked at him, how she treated him with more respect than she gave her own lords. The tension was like a storm waiting to break, and everyone knew it could not last. Serenia walked among them with calm grace, but inside she felt the weight pressing heavier each day. She knew they would act soon, and she knew Elias's life was in danger. Her heart clenched every time she thought of him, locked away in his cell, unaware of the blades that hung over his head. The fire inside her, once quiet, now burned fiercely. She could not allow them to take him from her, but she also knew the laws of the Empire were cruel, and breaking them would cost her more than just her title. The decision came one morning when the High Council summoned her. She entered the chamber with her head held high, though her stomach twisted with unease. The chamber was filled with elder nobles, their robes heavy with jewels, their eyes sharp with suspicion. At the center stood her father's most trusted advisor, Lord Veyrath, his voice cold and commanding as he addressed her. "Your Highness," he began, "the matter of the human prisoner must be resolved. His presence has disturbed the harmony of this court. We have tolerated your curiosity long enough. For the dignity of the Empire, he must be removed." Serenia's lips pressed into a thin line. "Removed? You mean executed?" "Call it what you will," Veyrath replied without flinching. "It is necessary. Your tears in the hall were a disgrace. The court has not forgotten. If you allow this human to live, your image as our future ruler will be forever stained. The people will see weakness. Weakness cannot lead an empire." The words struck deep, but Serenia refused to show it. She stood straighter, her voice calm but firm. "And what if I refuse?" The chamber erupted in angry voices. Nobles shouted over one another, accusing her of being bewitched, of betraying her blood. Veyrath raised his hand, and silence returned. His eyes narrowed. Then, by ancient law, the council will act in your stead. The human will die before the next moonrise. Serenya's heart raced, but she forced herself to breathe. They had cornered her, but she was not helpless. She remembered the old traditions, the ones nobles liked to pretend were forgotten, but still remained written in the laws of the empire. Slowly, she raised her chin and spoke. Then I invoke the trial of honor. The chamber fell into stunned silence. The trial was ancient, a rite so old that many believed it belonged only to legend. It allowed a prisoner or outsider to prove their worth through combat before the empire. If they survived, their life would be spared, and their honor recognized. Few had ever demanded it, for the trial was brutal and nearly impossible to win. But it was law, and even the council could not deny it. Veyrath's eyes narrowed further. You would gamble the empire's dignity on a human's blood? I would defend the truth that I see with my own eyes, Serenya answered. The law is clear. You cannot deny me. The council erupted again, but this time they had no choice. Reluctantly, Veyrath bowed his head. Very well, princess. The trial will be held. When Elias was brought before her that evening, Serenya saw the confusion in his eyes. The guards shoved him into the chamber, and he looked at her with the calm steadiness she had come to know so well. What happened? He asked quietly. She dismissed the guards and walked closer, her hands trembling, though her face remained composed. They want to kill you, she said softly. The council sees you as a danger. They would have executed you by now, but I invoked the trial of honor. It is the only way to save you. Elias frowned slightly. Trial of honor? It is an ancient combat. You must fight one of their champions before the court. If you survive, your life will be spared. If you win, you will have earned respect even they cannot deny. Elias gave a small, dry laugh. And if I lose? Her throat tightened. She wanted to say she would not let that happen, but she could not lie to him. If you lose, they will kill you. For a moment, silence hung between them. Then Elias shook his head with a faint smile. Figures. Humans always end up fighting against impossible odds. Serenya felt her chest ache. You don't have to accept, I could... He cut her off gently. Serenya, if this is the only way, then I'll fight. I didn't come this far just to kneel. Her eyes stung, and she turned away quickly to hide, the tears threatening to form. She wanted to beg him not to do it, but she knew he would never choose the path of surrender. That was who he was. That was who humans were. The day of the trial came quickly. The great arena of the capital, rarely used in modern times, was filled with nobles, soldiers, and citizens eager to see the strange human meet his end. The crowd buzzed with cruel excitement, their voices rising like thunder as Serenya entered with Elias by her side. He wore no armor, only the simple garments of a prisoner, though a short blade had been given to him for the fight. Across the arena, his opponent entered, a towering Veyari warrior clad in gleaming armor, his weapon a double-bladed staff that shimmered with energy. The crowd roared at the sight, certain of the outcome. To them, it was no contest. The human would die quickly, and the Empire's pride would be restored. Serenya sat in her seat above the arena, her hands gripping the armrests tightly, her heart hammering in her chest. She wanted to look away, but she forced herself to watch. She had invoked the trial. Now she had to see it through. The signal was given, and the duel began. The Veyari champion lunged forward, his strikes heavy and precise. Elias barely dodged the first blow, the energy, blade slicing the air where his head had been a moment before. He stumbled back, his smaller frame struggling to match the alien's reach and strength. The crowd jeered, shouting insults. Serenya's breath caught, but Elias did not falter. He rolled to the side, keeping his eyes fixed on his opponent, searching for weaknesses. Again and again the champion struck, each blow powerful enough to break bone if it connected. Elias's arms shook as he deflected with his blade, his body driven backward across the sand. Sweat ran down his brow, but still he refused to fall. His movements were not graceful, but they were clever. He feinted left and darted right, using speed to stay alive. Where the champion relied on strength, Elias relied on resilience, refusing to give ground for long. Minutes passed, and the crowd began to murmur. The human had not yet fallen. He was bleeding from shallow cuts, his breathing heavy, but he still stood. Each time he was struck down, he pulled himself back up. Each time he stumbled, he found his balance again. His spirit burned brighter than his body's limits. Serenya's nails dug into the wood of her seat as she watched. Every time Elias fell, her heart lurched. Every time he rose, pride swelled in her chest. The crowd that had once mocked him now began to grow restless, uncertain. Whispers spread. Perhaps this human was not as weak as they believed. At last, the champion grew impatient. With a roar, he swung his staff in a wide arc, putting all his strength into the blow. Elias ducked, low rolling beneath it, and in that moment he struck, not with strength but with precision. His blade cut deep into the champion's leg, sending the armored giant crashing to the ground. The arena fell silent. The champion, furious, tried to rise again, but his leg would not hold. Elias stood over him, his chest heaving, his blade trembling, in his grip. He could have struck the final blow, but he did not. Instead, he lowered his weapon and stepped back. "I won't kill you," Elias said, his voice raw but steady. "Defeat is enough." The silence broke into chaos. Some shouted in anger, others in awe. Serenya rose to her feet, her heart pounding with pride. Elias had not only survived, he had earned respect by showing mercy when none was expected. He had proven that humanity's strength was not in power alone, but in spirit, in the refusal to be broken, and in the choice to show honor even in victory. That night, Serenya stood before the court once more. Elias, though exhausted, stood beside her. She raised her voice so all could hear. "This human has proven his worth in the trial of honor. He has shown resilience, courage, and mercy. Let it be known that humanity is not weak. Let it be known that they deserve a place among the stars." The nobles could not argue. The law was clear. Elias's life was spared, and his name would be remembered. Serenya looked at him, her eyes shining with pride and something deeper. For the first time, she was not just a princess bound by duty. For the first time, she felt like a woman who had chosen her own path. The victory in the arena changed everything, but peace did not come easily. Elias's survival had silenced the council for the moment, yet their anger still lingered beneath the surface. Some nobles spoke of dishonor, others of danger. A few even began to whisper about removing Serenya herself from succession, claiming she was unfit to rule if her heart could be swayed by a human. Serenya knew this was only the beginning. Her choice had set events in motion that could not be stopped. Still, as she walked through the palace that night, she felt something she had not felt in years: hope. Elias walked beside her, weary and wounded, yet holding his head high. The people who had doubted him now looked at him with uncertain respect, even admiration. His presence had broken something in their pride, and though they would never admit it aloud, they were beginning to see him not as an insect, but as a man. She led him into her private chambers, dismissing the guards so they could be alone. Elias lowered himself into a chair with a groan, pressing a hand against his ribs. His wounds were painful but not fatal. He had endured worse, and Serenya knew his strength was not only in body but in spirit. "You could have killed him," she said quietly, moving to clean the blood from his arm. Elias gave a faint smile. "Maybe, but I didn't need to. Victory isn't just about crushing the other person. Sometimes it's about showing that you don't need to." Serenya looked at him with wide eyes. Such words were strange in her world, where strength was everything and mercy was weakness. Yet hearing them now, they felt like a truth she had been waiting her whole life to hear. She nodded slowly, her voice soft. "That is why they fear you, because you are different." "And you?" Elias asked. Her hand stilled for a moment before she continued tending his wound. "I do not fear you," she whispered. "I admire you." Silence followed, heavy with meaning. Neither spoke further, but the bond between them grew deeper in that quiet moment. The following days were tense. Rumors spread across the empire that the princess had chosen a human as her champion. Some mocked her, others praised her courage. In the city streets, common citizens began to speak Elias's name with a mix of curiosity and respect. For the first time, humanity's image in the eyes of the Veyari was shifting, even if only slightly. But in the council chamber, anger burned hotter than ever. Lord Veyrath and his allies plotted in secret, determined to end Elias's life before his influence could grow. They whispered of assassination, of poisoned cups and blades in the night. Serenia was not blind to their schemes. She knew she had only delayed the danger, not destroyed it. One night, as she stood on her balcony, Elias joined her. The stars stretched across the sky, bright and endless. He leaned against the railing, his gaze distant. "You ever think about Earth?" he asked suddenly. Serenia turned her head. "Your home?" He nodded. "Yeah, I don't know if I'll ever see it again. But I like to think that if I do, I'll have something to tell them. That humans aren't alone in the galaxy. That we stood tall, even when no one believed we could." Serenia's heart ached at his words. She reached out, placing a hand gently on his arm. "You will see it again. I swear it. I will not let them keep you here forever." Elias looked at her, surprised by the intensity in her voice. For a moment, he saw not a princess of a mighty empire, but a woman who had chosen to defy everything. For the sake of one man. He gave her a small smile. "You're braver than you think, Serenia." Days turned into weeks, and the storm finally broke. The council moved against her openly. They accused her of treason, of betraying the empire, by siding with a human. Soldiers loyal to the council tried to seize Elias in the night, but Serenia had been ready. With the help of a few trusted allies, she smuggled him out of the palace before they could take him. Together, they fled into the outer districts of the capital, where the empire's grip was weaker and the people less loyal to the council's will. For the first time, Serenia walked among her own citizens without the shield of her title. She saw their lives, their struggles, and their hopes. And to her surprise, many of them looked at Elias with the same respect she felt. Word of his trial had spread far beyond the palace. The story of a human who stood against a Veyari champion and lived had captured imaginations. He was no longer just a prisoner. He was a symbol. One night, as they rested in a hidden refuge, Elias turned to her. "You're risking everything for me." "Why?" Serenia looked at him with steady eyes. "Because you showed me what strength truly is. Not cruelty, not fear, but the courage to stand even when you are alone. You changed me, Elias. I cannot go back to who I was before." His breath caught at her words. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, the silence filled with everything unspoken. Then Elias reached out, taking her hand gently in his. She did not pull away. But their fragile peace could not last forever. The council's soldiers eventually found them. Surrounded in the streets, Serenia and Elias stood back to back, ready to fight though the odds were hopeless. Just as the soldiers closed in, a shout rang out. Citizens poured from the alleys and markets, blocking the soldiers' advance. Men and women, inspired by Elias's defiance, formed a barrier of bodies to protect him and their princess. The soldiers hesitated, uncertain. They were not trained to fight their own people. The commander barked orders, but the crowd only grew louder, chanting Elias's name, shouting for freedom and justice. Serenia felt tears sting her eyes. For the first time, she saw her people rise not out of fear, but out of hope. And at the center of it all was a human, the one they had once mocked. In that moment, the council's grip began to crack. The rebellion had begun not with swords, but with voices. The days that followed were filled with chaos. Protests spread through the capital, and the council struggled to maintain control. Serenia stood before the people, her voice strong as she declared her vision for a new empire, one built not on cruelty but on unity, where strength was measured not by bloodline, but by heart. Beside her stood Elias, no longer a prisoner but a symbol of what humanity could be. The battle for the future of the empire was not won in a single day. There were struggles, betrayals, and sacrifices. Yet through it all, Elias remained steadfast, and Serenia grew into the leader she was destined to become. In the end, the council was broken, their power shattered by the will of the people. Serenia ascended as empress not through fear but through choice, and at her side was Elias, the human who had taught her to cry, to hope, and to believe. Years later, when peace finally settled over the stars, Serenia often remembered the first time Elias had praised her, the words that had made her weep in the grand hall. To others it was a small thing, but to her, it was everything. For it was in that moment that she had discovered the truth that changed the galaxy, that sometimes all it takes is a single human voice to remind the universe that every heart, no matter how alien, longs to be seen.